channeling from many different entities in the Council from Triangulum Galaxy. Part 1. The souls of the lightworkers were born long before the Earth and the humanities manifested. Souls are born in waves. In one way souls are eternal without beginning or end. But in another way they are born at a given time. It is at this point that their consciousness reaches the feeling of an individual self. But before that time they already exist as an opportunity. There is still no awareness about me and others. The consciousness of me arises when a demarcation line is drawn in some way between groups of energies. We need to use metaphors to explain this. Imagine for a moment an ocean and imagine it as a huge field of flowing energies. Streams that constantly blend and break apart. Imagine that a diffused consciousness permeates this entire ocean. After some time, concentrations of consciousness arise in some places in the ocean. Consciousness is here more focused, less diffuse than in its immediate environment. Throughout the ocean there is a differentiation that leads to the development of transparent forms in the ocean. These shapes, which are focused points of consciousness, move independently of their surroundings. They perceive themselves differently than the rest of the ocean. What arises here is the birth of a rudimentary sense of self-consciousness. Why did focused points of consciousness arise in some parts of the ocean rather than in others? This is very hard to explain. Can you still feel that there is something very natural about this process? When you plant seeds in a soil bed you can see that all the small plants grow at their own pace and rhythm. Some will not grow as big or grow as easily as the others. Some will not grow at all. There are differences in the field. Why? The ocean energy intuitively seeks the optimal expression of all its varied currents or layers of consciousness. During the formation of individual points of consciousness within the ocean, it seems there is a force that affects the energies in the ocean from the outside. This is the divine power of inspiration, or the source that many calls it. It can be understood as the male aspect of what created you, while the ocean represents the female receptive side. The male aspect can be illustrated as light rays that flow into the ocean and which enhance the differentiation and separation process into individual parts of consciousness. They are like the sun rays that heat the plant bed. The ocean and the rays of light together give rise to an existence or creature that can be attributed to an archangel. This is an archetype with both a male and a female aspect. This is an angelic energy that manifests itself or expresses itself to you. After the birth of the soul as an individual entity of consciousness, it slowly leaves the ocean-like state of unity that has been its home for a long time. The soul is increasingly aware of being separated and on its own through this consciousness. In the soul there is a sense of loss or lack for the first time. When the soul as an individual essence paves its way of exploring, it will, to a certain extent, carry a longing for a whole, a longing for belong to something greater than itself. Deep within, the soul will preserve the memory of a state of consciousness where everything is one, where there is no me and others. This is what it regards as at home, a state of ecstasy, a place of complete security and fluidity. With this memory hidden in its consciousness, the soul begins its travels through reality through countless fields of experiences and internal exploration. The newborn soul is driven by curiosity and has a great need for experience. This was the important ingredient lacking in the ocean-like state of unity. It is now possible for the soul to freely examine what it wishes to explore. It is free to search for the whole in all possible ways. Within the universe there are countless levels of realities to explore. Earth is just one of them, and one that occurred relatively late on a cosmic scale set. Levels of reality, or dimensions, derive from internal needs or desires. Like all creations, they are manifestations of inner visions and reasons. The earth was created from an inner longing to bring together elements from different realities that were incompatible with each other. The earth was intended to be a melting pot for a large variety of different influences. We will below explain this more closely. At the moment, it is enough to say that the earth came in at a rather late time on the cosmic stage, and that many souls lived many lives of exploration and development on other reality planes or dimensions and stellar systems etc. long before the earth was even born. Lightworkers are souls who lived many lives on these other planes before ever incarnating them on Earth. This is what distinguishes them from Earth souls, as we will call them for simplicity. Earth souls incarnated in physical bodies on Earth relatively early in their development as individualized entities of consciousness. One could say that they started their circle of Earth life when their souls were in their starting state. By this time, lightworkers were already grown up. They had already gone through many experiences, and the kind of relationship they had with the souls of the Earth could be similar to between parent and child. The development of life and consciousness on Earth. The development of different forms of life was closely intertwined with the inner development of Earth souls. Even though no soul is bound to a specific planet, souls of the Earth may well be said to be the indigenous people on your planet. This is because their growth and expansion broadly coincide with the multiplication of life forms on Earth. When individual units of consciousness are born, they can be structurally similar to a single cell. Just as individual cells have a relatively simple structure, the inner movements to the newborn consciousness are transparent. No major differentiation has yet taken place. There is a world of possibilities then to explore, both physically and spiritually. The development from a newborn unit of consciousness to a type of consciousness that is self-reflective and capable of observing and responding to its environment can be roughly compared to the evolution of a single organism into a complex living organism that interacts with its environment in many different ways. Here we compare the development of self-consciousness with the biological development of life. And we do not just do this as a metaphor. In fact, the biological development of life that took place on Earth should be seen against the background of the spiritual need of exploration and experience that the souls of the Earth had. This need or request for exploration induced the variety of forms of life on Earth. As we previously pointed out, creation is always the result of an inner movement of consciousness. Although the evolutionary theory, which is currently being associated with science, accurately describes the development of life forms on your planet, it completely overlooks the internal driving force, the hidden motive behind this deeply creative process. The propagation of forms of life on Earth had its origins in an inner movement at the level of soul. As always, spirit precedes and creates matter. To begin with, incarnated souls in the physical forms that best suited their still rudimentary sense of me. That is, single-cell organisms. After gaining experience and integrating this within the period of time, the need arose for more complex physical expression possibilities. It was this way that more complex life forms came into being. Consciousness created physical shapes to meet the inner needs and desires of the souls whose collective consciousness originally populated the Earth. The advent of new species and the incarnation of Earth souls into individual members of these species constitute a magnificent experiment of life and consciousness. Although the driving force behind evolution is consciousness, not coincidence or coincidence, it does not follow a predetermined development line. This is because consciousness is in itself free and unpredictable. Earth souls experimented with all kinds of wildlife. They inhabited several types of physical bodies within the animal kingdom. But they did not follow all the same development line. The soul's development path is much more amazing and adventurous than you can imagine. There are no laws above or beyond you. You are your own team. So, for example, if you want to experience life from an ape's perspective, at one point you can live in an ape body, from birth to forwards or as a temporary visitor. The soul, especially the young soul, dares for experience and expression. This strong desire for exploration explains the cause of the diversity of life forms that lived and flourished on Earth. In this magnificent life experiment, the rise of human life marked the beginning of an important stage in the development of soul consciousness on Earth. Before we explain this in more detail, we will first treat the stages of inner soul development to a large extent. Consciousness is development, from childhood to mature age and father to old age. If we look at the development of self-consciousness after it is born as an individual entity, it goes into serious terms through three inner stages. These stages are there regardless of what particular level of reality, planet, dimension, star system, that consciousness chooses to live or experience. 1. The stage of innocence, paradise. 2. The stage of ego, sin. 3. The stage of other virginity, enlightenment. Metaphorically, these stages can be compared with childhood and mature age. After souls are born as individual entities of consciousness, they leave the ocean-like state of unity that they remember as happy and completely secure. They then go on to explore the reality in a whole new way. They are slowly becoming more aware of themselves and how they are unique in comparison with their fellow travelers. They are very receptive and sensitive at this stage. Like a young child looking at the world with wide open eyes expressing curiosity and innocence. This stage can be called paradoxically because the experience of unity and security is still in fresh memory of the newborn souls. They are still close to home, they still do not question their right to be who they are. Earth souls enter into ego state, human arrival to the earth. The period under which the souls explored plant and wildlife coincided with the stage of innocence or paradise on the inner level. Life flourished on earth under the guidance and protection of spiritual beings from nature and angels. Natural spirits work at the etheric level. That is, closer to the physical world than angels do. The etheric bodies of plants and animals were openly receptive to the energies of the caring and nourishing mother from nature and angels. They had no desire to break out or give up finding their own ways of doing things. There was still a deep sense of unity and harmony between all living beings. However, the emerge of the human race marked a turning point in the development of consciousness. In fact, by walking upright and through the development of the brain, the consciousness that resided in the human race got a better grip on its surroundings. The consciousness that incarnated in the human-like creature began to experience how it was to have more control over its immediate surroundings. It began to discover its own power, its own ability to influence its environment. It began to explore free will. This development was not a coincidence. It was the answer to an inner known need of Earth souls. A need to explore individuality in deeper levels than before. The growing self-consciousness of the Earth souls opened up for the arrival of man in biological sense. The person we know. When the souls of the Earth were ready to enter into the ego, the creation of man allowed these souls to experience a way of life with free will. It also equipped the incarnate consciousness with a greater awareness of me as opposed to others. With this, the scene was prepared to enable conflicts between my interest and your interest, my desire and your desire. The uniqueness broke away from the obvious device, the natural order of rewarding and taking, to find out what other ways were available. This marked the end of paradise on earth. But we ask you not to imagine this as a tragic event, but as a natural process. Like the seasons, this was a natural swing of events that would ultimately enable you to balance divinity and individuality within your own being today. When the soul's consciousness entered the ego scene and began to explore of being human, the nature and angels fluctuated slowly back into the background. It is in the nature of these powers to respect the free will of all the energies they encounter. They will never exercise their influence uninvited. So self-consciousness was allowed to rule freely and the souls of the earth became acquainted with all the privileges and disadvantages of the power. This also affected the plant and animal kingdom. One can say that the war energy that occurred was to some extent absorbed by these non-human kingdoms and created a sense of wild disorder. It still matters in this way. When Earth souls needed new venues for experience, this made them also vulnerable to new external influences. We particularly want to draw attention to the types of extraterrestrial, galactic influences that strongly influenced the mature but still young souls of the Earth. It is at this point in our history that the souls we have called light workers come into the picture.